Internet! Welcome to the FNAF channel with the white dog thing.
December 13th, 2015. FNAF 4 has been out for a little bit now, but the theories have begun to stagnate. So many things in this game just don't seem to add up. They feel inconsistent with prior games. Theorists are tripping over each other trying to make sense of it all. There's clearly important lore in FNAF 4 and obviously it means something, but what? We fire up YouTube only to be greeted with a new video drop from MatPat. This video was released in the wake of one of Scott's legendary real-time lore drops during one of MatPat's old-school FNAF parties. Now, I feel bad for you new fans, you really missed out. This was from before MatPat had like a kid and responsibilities and stuff. Dude, his FNAF parties were crazy.
For a year of taking shots.
Not that I was ever invited.
FNAF King, that was very rude of you.
This was a really exciting event, and some would even argue it was the most important day in FNAF history. If you're interested in the details of that livestream, check out Yaz's recent video on the subject. In the wake of this momentous occasion, all eyes were on MatPat to drop the video that made sense of Scott's 3 cryptic clues. What is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. In the FNAF 4 minigame, why would the tiny toy Chica be missing her beak? And finally, 4 games, 1 story. Okay, cool, but what does it all mean?
Fuck, what the fuck?
These may have been direct clues from Scott, but they were still cryptic. We needed MatPat's take. What followed would be the most controversial, third most controversial. What followed would be among the most controversial moments in FNAF history. MatPat proposed the Dream Theory. Dream is a Minecraft YouTuber who blatantly cheated in a speedrun and then made up some bull— Oh wait, MatPat has done a couple of Dream Theories, one sec. There it is, okay. The Dream Theory proposed that the events of FNAF 1 and 2 did not actually occur, that they were all in the mind of the crying child, the protagonist of FNAF 4. As you can imagine, the fanbase was not thrilled with this idea. MatPat himself pointed out that the conclusion would likely feel like a cop-out to a lot of people, and he was right. Dream Theory trivialized everything that had led up to the events of FNAF 4. More than half of the FNAF content available at the time was suddenly just a dream, and that fact could be used to tie up most loose ends in a plausible but ultimately unsatisfying way. If you think he was actually a robot the whole time sounds like a dumb cliche, try to imagine it was just a dream the whole time. Yeah, 3 months ago when I started making videos, I never imagined my channel would ever become as successful as it has been, so thank you for watching. Ultimately, Scott recognized that the community was unhappy with the Dream Theory direction, and he opted not to reveal the contents of the FNAF 4 ending box. To this day, we will never truly know what was in the box, other than it being the pieces all put together or whatever. In his interview with Daco, Scott affirmed MatPat's belief that the contents of the box changed over time. At the time of FNAF 4's release, there were only the 4 games. FNAF 1 alone made up 25% of the series. By suggesting that everything up until FNAF 4 had been a dream, Scott was invalidating more than half the series, and he was trivializing the classic FNAF games for which the community had such fond, strong memories. Of course people didn't like it. Today, we have a lot more FNAF content. New games, books, comics, a movie someday maybe. You get the idea. Whenever you add more content to a franchise, the existing content is going to be somewhat de-emphasized. It has to be. It no longer makes up as large a portion of the whole. This got me thinking, how would I really feel about Dream Theory today? Curious, I revisited MatPat's video, and I was really surprised to find that not only do I agree with MatPat that Dream Theory was beyond any reasonable doubt Scott's intention for FNAF 4, but I also think it's actually a cool theory that deserves another shot. Naturally, the place to start are the 3 new clues Scott provided. The first and most damning is what is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. MatPat specifically relates this to the cutscene where the crying child witnesses a staff member suiting up into a mascot costume. Specifically, he saw a shadowy figure placing a Fredbear head onto someone. The implication is that this inspired the purple guy character from the crying child's dream that we know as FNAF 2. MatPat makes a very strong case that there were no murders, that nobody actually got stuffed in the animatronic suits, none of it happened. He points out the fact that Scott uses purple to represent shadows and that a child could easily misinterpret this staff member placing an animatronic head in a dark supply closet as a sinister, shadowy figure stuffing people inside characters they thought were robots. There's another line that supports this too, one of the most mysterious ones in FNAF 4. In the Night 2 minigame, the crying child is lost and alone at Fredbear's family diner. They go to get help only to encounter an employee wearing the Fredbear costume. The lines, "Don't you remember what you saw?" and "You know what will happen if he catches you appear. It felt like these lines never really connected to anything in the game. The implication was obvious. Something traumatic involving the pizza establishment had happened to the crying child, but what was anyone's guess? Being a FNAF game, we all assumed that they bore witness to a grisly murder or something, but Dream Theory was able to account for all of it. The traumatic event was just a misunderstanding. The kids saw someone suiting up as one of the mascots and they thought something sinister was going on. They thought this shadowy figure was secretly stuffing people into animatronic suits. Don't you remember what you saw? Yeah, the crying child saw someone putting on the golden Fredbear suit, the exact same suit that they're now terrified of. You know what will happen if he catches you. Yeah, the crying child thinks that they're at risk of being stuffed into a robot, which in turn leads to the wild, vivid fever dream that is FNAF 1 and 2. This idea that the events of FNAF 1 and 2 are all just a consequence of a child misunderstanding things they partially witness in shadows connects to the other clues Scott dropped as well. A huge number of the elements present in FNAF 1 and 2 make some sort of appearance in the quote-unquote real world of FNAF 4. The little girl's Chica toy is missing their beak. Presumably it has been broken. In FNAF 2, Toy Chica's beak falls off during her jump scares. In that same Night 2 minigame we referenced before, if you head all the way left, you see Fredbear and Spring Bonnie cloaked in shadow. Notice that in FNAF 2 there are two shadow animatronic hallucinations that have a very rare chance of appearing: Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie. The implication is obvious. These animatronics are products of the crying child's unconscious memories of seeing this, of seeing Fredbear and Spring Bonnie out of the spotlights, cloaked in shadow. This minigame seems to take place on an evening the child was lost, scared, and alone, and it makes sense that they would be extra impressionable. Again, in Scott's own words, what is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. They saw those two animatronics in the dark, they looked creepy, and as a result, there's a rare chance for strange shadow versions of those characters to appear in FNAF 2. Why? Because when FNAF 4 was released, Scott's intention was obviously for FNAF 1 and 2 to have been a dream. It's not a coincidence that those two characters we see cloaked in shadow correspond perfectly to the shadow animatronics in FNAF 2. Characters that are otherwise basically inexplicable. Don't worry though, there's more.
Not okay, not okay!
MatPat pointed out how Michael's Foxy mask jump scares in FNAF 4 share strong visual similarities to Foxy's FNAF 1 jump scares. The withered animatronics correspond to the crying child's older, stained, ripped stuffed animals, whereas the toy animatronics are a subconscious expression of the newer, high-tech plastic toys. FNAF 2 begins by explaining how the new animatronic models are incredibly high-tech and fancy, which aligns perfectly with the way the merchandise is presented in FNAF 4. Even Mangle gets explained as just being a toy the crying child's sister messed around with. We get further corroboration for this theory when one of the neighborhood girls says, "You'd better watch out, I hear they come to life at night, and if you die, they hide your body and never tell anyone." These are urban legends that the local kids spread around. They're ghost stories. It just so happens the crying child is particularly traumatized by them, and these are the stories that led to the events of FNAF 1 and 2 in their head. The child with a Spring Bonnie toy mentions that their daddy says they have to be careful with him lest they pinch their finger. He is a finger trap, he says. This is very obviously the innocent real-life event that the crying child experienced that inspired Springtrap. Ever notice how Balloon Boy felt out of place in FNAF 2? All the other characters were anthropomorphic animals, whereas Balloon Boy is just a dude. Yeah, it's because Balloon Boy isn't even a Fredbear animatronic. He's just an unconscious manifestation of this neighborhood kid recast to fit into the context of the nightmare. Ready for the trippiest part of all? You might notice that I've been saying Fredbears this whole time to refer to the restaurant rather than Freddy's or even the word Fazbear. Why? Well, if we go along with the idea that Scott intended Dream Theory when making FNAF 4, it implies Freddy Fazbear's Pizza isn't even a real pizza chain. If FNAF 4 is reality and the prior games are just the kid's dream, the only confirmed location is Fredbear's. The show is called Fredbear and Friends. Dream Theory literally implies that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza never existed, and it's just the twisted, distorted version of Fredbear's in a child's dream. Why was it the Bite of 83 and not the previously mentioned Bite of 87? Because there was no Bite of 87, that was just something the crying child's unconscious brain invented during his dreams. MatPat's smoking gun, though, were the chimes that ring out at the end of each night. In FNAF 1 through 3, you hear the chimes of a grandfather clock at 6 a.m., the same kind of clock you'd hear if you were sleeping in a house. In FNAF 4 though, we hear the hospital sounds, implying that the protagonist is no longer waking up in their bed. They're in the ICU in critical condition from the bite of 83. Regardless, they are waking up from a nightmare. I get it, it's underwhelming to think that the early FNAF games we have such fond memories of were just dreams. However, now that enough time has passed and there's a lot of FNAF content out there for us, I actually think Dream Theory is pretty cool. Scott recognized how seriously we were taking his games and their stories, and he wanted to come up with a way to justify some of the more implausible, hand-wavy stuff from earlier games. As MatPat says, Dream Theories are OP because they give a plausible way to explain all of it. Ultimately, Scott chose to abandon the Dream Theory idea, instead taking FNAF down an alternate path. This inevitably resulted in more sci-fi stuff, more suspension of disbelief, and overall a lot more silliness. I'm fine with that. As I've said recently, I've always viewed FNAF as more of a thrill ride. To me, it never needed to be that deep. That said, I actually think Dream Theory recontextualizes the first few FNAF games into a really tragic story. Instead of scary, it's just sad. A boy experiences trauma and develops an irrational fear of the mascots at a local pizza chain. He's tormented by his brother as well as the local neighborhood kids, all of whom love Freddy's. He constructs a vivid, twisted, horrific version of the franchise in his dreams, where he's hunted by monstrous versions of the characters. It isn't real though. There are no murders. Nobody is getting stuffed into suits. Nothing sinister is happening whatsoever, which only makes it more tragic when the child's greatest irrational fears are realized and he becomes the victim of the bite of 83. An accident, a tragedy.